Eunoia. It's your host, Sable Danielle, and today we're joined by Ashley Burney. Thank you for joining us today, Ashley.
Yes, my pleasure. I'm excited.
Yay, I'm excited to have you here. So, a little background about how we met. I met you at the Melanin Market where you asked me to be part of your amazing event, Your Bold is Beautiful, which took place in October. Um,
Yes.
So we'll dive into that and more of your remarkable journey. Like I learned so much about you through these past few months where I've met you and worked together with you. She's got an amazing journey, but first we're going to do a random question and then we'll
Okay.
get to the good stuff.
Yes, I love it. And you know what? And to comment on how we met, my husband knows the vibes that I like to attract and the energy. I was really trying to hit every vendor that was at that event. And he was like, you have to go by and just, you have to connect with her because I really believe and da, 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 da. And then when we met, it was just a connection. So I'm so glad that like I honored that feeling that I had. It was awesome.
Me
So
too, because I got nothing but good energy, good vibes from you.
that's
And
awesome.
and I think to start, I think we just both live intentionally. So I think that's a huge part of the energy that we felt.
Yes, yes, because we can't connect with everybody, and we have to honor what we feel too, because the
Yes.
body does not lie. Okay, it don't lie.
No.
And I'm like, listen, I'd rather know up front than get caught up, tied up, and everything else, and the next thing the stuff that happens further down. But yeah, the energy, it was just amazing. Just the connection was there. So, and it is there. So
Yay. Well, I appreciate being part of it. So, okay, this one just says a current book. Do you have a current book you're reading?
a current book, yes. So I'm actually reading. Oh, four right now. I'm reading one by Sarah Roberts, TD Jake's daughter, and she just talks about really unveiling like who you are and like honoring yourself and not allowing the things that arise in life to um, be distractions. And we know that we all live a very busy life and just really intentional, right, with
Yes.
what we connect ourselves to and what we're doing. And so, but hers, it started off like as a child and things growing and her carrying stuff into her adulthood. And as I'm reading it, I am reminded of who I was as a little girl and where some of the things that some of the beliefs, some of the patterns, some of the things that I've seen that I've carried into my adulthood, and that I've had to work through and grow through, right, to know what I need to let go and then what I need to kind of keep close. So that's a good one. And then a lot of poetry too. So
Yeah.
I try to stay with feeding my soul because the space that God has called me in is to empower other souls. And so I have to ensure that my cup is always seen as half full and not half empty, and counting my blessings, and then using my journey in life and the things that I've gone through to empower and motivate others. So definitely got to keep my soul fed.
That is great. You said 4 books. That's a lot of books to read at one time.
And it is. And you know what I do? So what I do is I'll start them, and then depending on how I'm feeling or what energy I feel, right, in accomplishing goals and tasks and things like that, I'll just pick up the next one and just pick up where I was. And so it's interesting how it feeds me because I really go off of how I'm feeling. Like if I need to know that, from a spiritual sense,
Yeah.
I'll turn to Sarah Jake's book. But then the affirmations, the poetry, and then also I've read Becoming by Michelle Obama like 5 times, but there's always something when I reread it that I am given a different perspective on something.
Yeah.
So it's all by women authors. because I feel like I can relate in a sense from, young girl to woman, who is a wife, who's a mother, sister, and all that good stuff. So it's just I pick them up when depending on how I feel and the mood and what I know that the message has been.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, you know what? I'll tap into that. So it's never like a race to finish them, but where I pick up, it just seems like it's right on time.
Oh, that's perfect. That's nice.
Yeah.
I like the first book that I forgot what you said it was called, but the first book you mentioned, how it kind of talks about things that you experienced as a child and how you bring it into your adulthood, because that's huge. Like, we bring so much stuff into our adult life that carries over from childhood that a lot of us don't recognize or take the time to even show some love, I guess, and
Yes.
work through, like, and
Yes.
go through.
And being gentle too with ourselves to understand that it's okay to be honest with the things that you're not necessarily proud of,
Yeah.
um, that have happened, but it's definitely helped you become, in a sense, who you needed to unveil of who you are,
Yeah.
so that you know what to work on, the importance of loving you. Because, and I'll talk about it later, in the podcast, but if you don't love yourself, people can't love you, because
Yeah.
it's almost like love is blind if you don't love yourself, because we have these expectations of others in loving us, but then to recount what we love about us or how we are just a badass,
Yeah.
then we got work to do. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So it just is, it definitely is, in honoring who that young lady was and who that amazing, strong, passionate woman that we are, women that we are now. So it's
Yeah.
definitely important.
I love that. So, why don't we start with you telling us who you are and what you represent?
Yes. So Ashley Burney, founder and president of Heart to Heart LLC, which is a media, events, and product platform. We have a lifestyle brand called Your Bold is Beautiful. And that is a series of events that we host that empower, motivate, and uplift women and their allies. And so our events are really about creating experiences for those who attend, because, you know, we can go to summits and conferences all the time, and hopefully somebody will stop us and ask us what our name is, or hopefully we'll have a connection when we leave. But Your Bold is Beautiful will give you that. And so it's just been so amazing to see how impactful and influential that the platform is and has been in so many lives. And so this was, something that started off as you believe it or not, an after school club for teens. I used to work in the Clark County School District for almost 10 years. And in my position where this was kind of this position, or that this vision of mine was planted, I was a dean secretary at the time. So I was seeing, who many would call frequent flyers, those who just needed, guidance and redirection. And I am a short, tiny little something, but I can be a fireball. And so, and the kids knew it. But what I did is I gained their trust. And it was, instead of thinking of a typical, disciplinarian situation, right, where, you're going to get in trouble and you're going to get suspended and you're going to get, told you can't come back to school. I knew that I had to do something about that, because those kids were coming in and they needed an outlet, and they needed to feel as if someone would listen to them and would talk to them in their voice. And
Right.
so, crazy faith and thinking crazy, right? I went to my supervisor who was overseeing, those types of programs. And I said, I've really been, praying about this, but I know what I feel. And so I just pitched the idea, and I built the curriculum, and I connected with those in the community that would come in and talk to the teens, and really be, an amazing resource. And that's exactly what happened. And so attendance grew, 5 kids, 10 kids, 60 kids. And then they had to move us into the gymnasium, and they were asking, like, what do you need campus security? I'm like, listen, I'm like, no. And let me tell you why. There's obviously a word in this, which is why it's growing on its own. I mean, it was only for that particular high school that I was at for those students. And so then then word traveled quickly, and many motivational speakers in the community were asking how they could be involved and how they could be a part. And it just grew, and we had, snacks and food and all that good stuff. Because, a good way to get to somebody's heart is through their stomach. Yeah. And I don't know if I'm talking about me, but feed me and I'm going to be okay. You know what I mean? So I was fed, and they were fed, and we were just talking about those things, such as self-esteem and depression and suicide and drugs and alcohol and sex and all of those things that would technically, if you envision a mouth, you would see tape over it when you talk about in the school system, right? And so it was just amazing. So then it was my time to depart the district, and I just wanted to grow. And that's when I actually had branched off into nonprofit, and more high schools were actually reaching out to see if I would pilot the program at their school. Well, because it was a baby of mine, and I knew that I needed to necessarily be in the mix at a level that I knew I couldn't, it was a few that piloted it and it went great. But as it started to grow, it was then discovered that this actually needs to go community wide. So how do I go community wide? So then it went from working directly with teens, and I don't consider them at risk. These are individuals like you and me and their mothers and fathers, and who need to be poured into. And that's exactly what the platform did. So as it evolved, I then started working more with women in the community, and just building, right? Just building the platform and the services, and realizing what I loved being a part of. Yeah. And so it just took off. And so it has evolved into this women's empowerment platform, which empowering our allies as well. Because if a man is not at the table hearing the thoughts in a woman's head when it comes to, the things that define who we are, right? And what we work so hard for. And when we talk about equal pay and equal opportunity, because when a woman taps into her bold and she understands her worth, game over. Because we need to be at that table, because typically, and we all know what we've seen typically at the table, but when we know that our voice matters, that's where the platform has just taken off. So it's just been amazing. And in February of this year, I became my own boss. And it literally, thank you, because it was a leap of faith, because you're stepping into new territory. You're stepping into spaces that you may not have necessarily been in. Like, you've gotten a taste, but when you think about what you prayed for years ago, right? And in discovering who we were, right, as that young girl, to blossoming him into that woman, it has been such a ride of just appreciation and understanding that I love dreaming, because that's where I feel we fall short when we endure circumstances and experiences and we allow that to define who we are or where we're going. Yeah. And the moment that we allow like that to set in, the fight's a little harder, because we're carrying then baggage that we need to let go. Yes. We need to let it be. So that's kind of how that's just blossomed, and how I take so much pride and joy in a platform that I like to say it's our platform. Yeah. Because yes, it's events and the planning and the logistical pieces and all of that good stuff. But once one is connected to heart, it's very hard to let it go. So, and I'm proud of that.
You should
So,
be. You create, I mean, I didn't know the full background of where it started and how it started in high schools and how you had such a huge impact on the community and the kids. I think that is amazing. That's
yes, and it's so interesting because those kids are now grown with kids.
oh my
And
God.
one, I see my age and I'm like, oh, and then I start to see a few more grays come out and I'm like, oh my goodness. And then they're like, oh, well, I want to let you know that I had a baby and that I'm working and I'm being impactful in the community that I once felt didn't embrace who I was. And that was just so relieving. And every time I think about it, I get a little choked up just because, I mean, I just got a text today from a friend of mine who connected with one of my former students last night at dinner because her story is so phenomenal.
Yeah.
And she has an organization, and now she's helping my friend and some initiatives that she has going. But it's when one sees their worth, it is just it leaves me speechless at times. And
Yeah.
I feel it right here. And I'm not going to cry on the podcast, which I do, but I just I feel it
Yeah.
because it was this young lady that I'm talking about. She had to endure some things. She was counted out plenty of times. And it wasn't until we started working together and she was one of my students on my caseload. And this is when I had left the district and joined an organization that helps get students on track that are not on track to graduate. And it's tough, because you have everything that the school is requiring from you, right? All these, requirements, these tests and things that they don't even no longer have. And just to see them push through. And this is the young lady who went on to get her master's, and I was at her graduation for her bachelor's when she graduated from UNLV.
Oh,
But now she's working for the same organization and she's a case manager to youth, and it's just full circle.
that's,
So it's just so awesome.
that's great. Um, so before I ask the next question, I just want to say one thing that I love about you is that you're emotional. You're like a big ball of emotions, whether it's happy, sad, like you're
Woo.
all about it. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm a big ball of emotions. So
And you know what? And you know what it is that we are told, okay, that as women, when we cry or show emotion, it is a sign of weakness.
yeah,
And that is BS. And I'll be the first. That is nonsense. That is ridiculous because it's actually, and I encourage many, tap into that emotion, boo, because you're going to feel something,
hmm
right? So if I am, and I do cry. I cry when I'm happy. I cry when I'm sad. I cry when I'm pissed off. And those are all, it's expression, because if you hold it in later in life, you'll hear things like, the triggers that come from holding so much in.
yeah,
And when we talk about women's health and our bodies and our gut and our soul, it's impacted in so many ways that we don't even know. And it's almost as if we neglected,
yeah,
right? Her. And so when we start to heal her, we're talking about deep rooted things that if we never talk about or if we never show expression, then we're not being who we were called to be. And it's natural. So,
yes. And I think that showing emotion and being able to tap into that also just shows how deep of a person you are, or like how much you can connect to someone, how much you truly genuinely care.
yes,
Because if there's emotions there, then you know that there's real, genuine, authentic feelings behind it, and it's
exactly.
not just stonewall, you know.
Exactly. And you want to feel, I feel as humans, like we have this attachment, right? That we, um, that is revealed in so many things that we could ignore at times. I mean, even when you talk about like a significant other, like I want to feel like you are carrying my emotions and yours at times.
Yeah.
That's love language that you have embraced and you have wrapped me into, me feeling comforted, right?
Yeah.
By you just picking up on that, on me expressing myself. And so that's very important. I like to be intuitive and tapping into that, because if I don't, then, and I've been there too. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Not expressing and not feeling as if you are given the opportunity to express yourself. You ball so many things up and then pray to dear God that the wrong person don't cross your path, because it's coming out.
Yes.
It's coming out. So yes.
Very, very true. I mean, we're humans, we're emotional
Mhm.
beings. It's part of our nature. So I think it is very important to embrace that.
Yes.
But going back to what you were saying earlier, like I was going to ask, why is it so important for you to impact your community? Because you do a lot of that in great ways.
Yes. I really feel like the statement of be the change who you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
We talk so much about what we need to do, how we need to do it, all this other stuff. It's all talk. But what changed the game for me was the nonprofit work. Like I love grassroots work. I actually love hearing no, because I'm gonna prove to you why it should be a yes.
Yes.
Right. So for me, in my work with children and work with the community, I have been loved on, like my community, but it's because it's coming from a place of work and passion, right? And let me rephrase that. Not necessarily work, but it's the passion that I'm putting out that's actually meeting the energy of being in a community that I love.
Yes.
If I know that my community needs change, I can't sit back and just talk about what the change needs to be. I need to be a part of it. So that is hearing no and, changing situations to yes, because, and that's come through sustainable programs. That's come through being a voice for many that feel as if they don't have a voice. It's being at that table. It's not being afraid to meet people. And a lot of experiences that I've seen and that I know to be true is the fact that people are using their negative experiences that they've had, and they have guards up.
Yeah.
So they don't want to trust you. They don't want to open up. They don't want to tap into spaces that are uncertain. But when you are on this journey to be the change that you want to see, you know that that's going to come through journey.
Yeah.
It's not going to come overnight. And I can tell you right now, I never imagined in a million years that me being a dean secretary at the time in that position, having covered almost 10 years, as mentioned before, that that's what would birth something that's so great.
Yes.
13, 14, 15 years later. Now, when we say years later, obviously it didn't come overnight. So there was still self-discovery. There was still some light of motivation to keep going, despite, and we'll talk about what my journey has been, but it really is being the change that you want to see. So the work that has been put in has kept my passion lit, because I'm sure you've heard, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me has been because it is putting out what I want in return. So if it is great energy, then I need to be that. If it is empowering people to look past their situation, if it is through education, I always believed that we could always learn something. So you never would have thought that, or I never would have thought that during the pandemic, I would have, went back to school. And I did. I went to Cornell University and took one of their online certification programs, because what was being revealed was that we as people are hurting. And through freedom will come, the education and the knowledge will then start the freeing process.
Yeah.
And so I went for their diversity, equity, and inclusion certificate program. And I was connecting with leaders all across the world from different positions and nonprofit, for profit, it was just so awesome to see that everyone was craving the same type of yearning to be better.
Yeah.
And so always being willing to learn and adapt to new situations and things like that, that has really kept my fire for community lit for as long as it has. So
That's
yeah.
great. I mean, you have a lot of things driving you, a lot of things behind you, and like you said, you have put in the work because not because it's not anything bad, but because you have to actually
Yes.
take action and put intent and work and action
Yes.
behind what you want. But it brought you to such a wonderful place, and it's a slow progress, or maybe it's a quick one, but it usually is a longer journey if you want it to be successful and impactful.
Yes. And just also knowing that, and I have mentioned, just it's not going to come overnight.
Yeah.
It's not. And it's not meant to. If things happened in a blink of an eye, we wouldn't work. We
Right.
wouldn't work for it. Right. But as we are discovering who we are, that is where those nuggets are revealed
Mhm.
of what we need to be aligned with, what we need to be doing, what we need to stay away from, what really meets our energy. And I'm huge on energy. Because I just feel like for where I'm at in life, I I need to make sure that that's matched, and
Yeah.
that's through friendships, that's through relationships, um, and it's definitely served me for who and where I'm at today. So
I think that's very powerful too. I think that goes back to intentional about who you are, intentional about who you keep around you, intentional about how you feel, and all that matters. And that depends on the people you keep around you. So I think it's
yes.
smart to want to make sure you feel good vibes, good energy from the people, relationships, and everything that you have in your life.
And to the point of that, as you grow, it's okay for your circle to change,
Mm-hmm.
because where you're going is not meant for people to come along with in that season.
Mm-hmm.
It's not saying that, okay, I'm grown, I don't even want nothing to do with you. That's not it. What it is the fact that if I'm seeing more of the like mindedness in those who I am keeping close, right? My vision, my business plans, my goals. Not everybody can know, and it's in a sense to protect your peace,
Mm-hmm.
not theirs.
Yeah.
It's yours. So for you to be aligned with who you need to be aligned with, that's where the energies will show you. It'll help you out, because you'll feel something and go, nope, that
Yeah.
ain't gonna serve me. You know what I mean? And being honest with yourself to get to that place of making sure that there's a release somehow. But
Yes.
all
Um,
that good stuff.
So you exude confidence. You owe it, like, since I met you, I feel like you exude confidence and everything about you just seems very pure. So have you always been confident, and how did you become so fearless?
Very good question, and thank you. I feel as if the things that I've had to endure in life have helped show me what I love about me,
Yeah.
which is where the confidence piece comes in, because I am one of four children. My mother, I have an older brother and two younger sisters, and then I'm somewhat in the middle. The whole middle child, I see that almost having like three, and you're in the middle. So there's four of us, right? So for me, when I watched my mother um, go through things that I could not control, and how she carried her crown so well, um, it showed me what I did not want to be. And let
Mhm.
me explain. So there's three girls, and we've all told our mother that at some point in time in life, right, that we didn't want to be like her,
Mhm.
right? And it wasn't in a rude or mean way. It was that she has showed us a lesson
Right.
of who not to be and how to push through, right? So my upbringing, my mom was a preacher's kid. I grew up in the church. Church was all I knew. Yes, we were there like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We were there every day of the week. But it was our upbringing and our teaching and being surrounded by strong women, that it was no matter what they endured, they were going to come out on top. And on top could mean surviving situations that were devastating,
Yeah.
right? It could be, when you talk about, physical and mental and emotional abuse, right? When you've seen death, and it's the strength which builds character,
Yeah.
which builds confidence. Those are what has kept me wrapped tight, because I know how I want to look back. And now that I have two children, I have a 16-year-old son and an 8-year-old daughter. Looking at them doesn't matter their sex. It is Gigi, my daughter, Gigi Bean. We call her that, a little nickname. If only you know who you are and understanding how to love yourself at a young age, and not wait for it to come through someone else, because that's harder when you're an adult.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So for my daughter, in teaching her young, and then my son also, because there's this whole saying of, a son will look for a woman who reminds them of their mother,
Mhm.
right? In a sense where strong and, caretaker and loves themselves and loves my son, that needs to love, because my son getting to that age, he's 16. I told him, I said, listen, I know they gonna start coming, but they better come correct. And I know what correct is, so I'm trying to teach him what is correct, but
Yeah.
that's a whole other topic. But when it comes to confidence, right, it's only because I've been surrounded by role models that love me when I slipped, have taught me to embrace everything about me, because a lot of times, even society says, by this age, you need to have this accomplished, and, you should look like this, and you should, you know, listen, everybody's journey is different. And if you understand that from the get go, in which I did, because I had those role models to look up to and to ask questions, and they were very transparent with me. I could tell, some, they would want to reserve information, but the majority of who I was encamped by,
Yeah.
they kept it 100. They were very straight. They were very, they told me when I was wrong, which is a life lesson, because as an adult, adults get more offended easily by being told something that could help them.
Yeah.
right? So long answer, but really what it was for me was being surrounded by strong women who embraced me at every stage of life, and motivated me and encouraged me. Even when I could have been crazy. I could have, like in the discovery phase, right? But they kept it real. They kept it real, and that's important. So I try to do that with my children and those teens and children that I work with, because a lot of people have lied to them. A
Mhm.
lot of people have lost their trust. And so I just try to keep it real. And
Yeah.
it's got me where I am today. So
Well, I think that's important because sometimes it feels like, or it may seem like adult figures or parents may try to hide things from you to protect you, but
yes,
that doesn't allow you to learn or see the full value of the big picture, um,
exactly.
or understand so that you can kind of try to work through things yourself from a younger age. Um,
Exactly.
so I'm glad that you do that with your kids. And that actually
Yes.
is a good segue to the one of the questions I was going to ask later, but what are some values and like thought patterns that you want to instill or that are important to you to put into your children?
So, there are so many, raising children in today's society is very hard. It is it is like this roller coaster because society has told them by the ages that my children are of who and what they could be.
Mhm.
Okay. So when you have also the influences from social media, when you have, and don't get me wrong, listen, I give it to who's created all of these interesting, time captivating platforms, right? When it comes to our children,
Mhm.
it's actually an issue because they are being introduced to things, right, that maybe didn't even happen when we were coming up,
Mhm.
right? They are, just the self-esteem and you know the spiral of emotions that these kids have to go through, is it makes the job of parents a tad more tough. And there is the importance of affirmations with my children are so important. I know, I'm always in my baby girl's ear and talking to my son. The one thing that I do with my baby girl is, who's beautiful, who's unique, whose bold is beautiful, whose skin color is beautiful. And after she answers all those questions, it's me, me, me. And my mom does it with her. I do it with her. And it will make that jerk that comes along one day to try to tell her anything different, it'll make it a little more harder for them.
Yeah.
Because why? Because she feels it. She owns it. She loves it. It's so sad to hear, even from, my son's age and his friends and classmates at his school, we've gotten, a couple of notices just in this school year that, a few students have taken their own lives. And these are peers. This is this is tough. This is for a 15, 14, 15, 16 to go through the fact of they may not have known them, but sharing the same campus with them at
Yeah.
one point in time. And now the weight of the world has consumed them, and they remotely feel, and this is where I go, they remotely feel as if they're not loved or wanted, or that they're not existent. And it gets me because anybody who knows me, I will embrace you with the tightest hug and probably not let go until I say I'm ready. Not you be ready, but me be ready, because the exchange of energy. But talking with my son, son, how are you? I know that is so unfortunate. And if you ever need to talk, And I want you to know that you're loved and that not every girl who flaunts theyself in front of you deserves your energy. Know what you want. You want somebody who, has, common interests, to do fun things with, and that's not dragging you down or consuming you in such a negative way where you forget Elijah, you forget who you are. So the things that I try to instill in my children, one is love yourself. Because if you don't love yourself, no one else can love you. Expectations won't align, period. So love yourself is one. You are your biggest cheerleader. And it sounds so cliche, but the little things that, and I can even say little things, the milestones that one accomplishes, it feels good to, girl, you rock that. Something as comprehensive as when I talk to my daughter when she has like recitals and she's so scared to go on stage. And girl, when she gets that routine down or she does her thing, I'm like, you go, girl. Do you remember what you felt? Now, Boss Lady came over and said, don't you ever doubt who you are, because that feeling is right on the other side of fear, right? So reminding them that they're biggest cheerleaders. Also, you define who you are. No one else has the power to define who you are. No one else has your fingerprint. We have our own fingerprint. And I always use this as an example because that means that no one else can do it like us. Mm-hmm. No one has our mark. There may be people that try, but no one has our mark. And so I always try to remind them that no one else can define your beauty and what you mean to this world. Because if it was meant to be, there would be another one of you, same fingerprint, same name, there's no one else like you. Yeah. So go kill it. Kill the game. Do you boo? As people say, do you boo? And also, circumstances don't define who you are.
Yes.
So if you go through something and it just seems like a test, and you experience so many emotions and you experience so many things, it doesn't define who you are and where you're going. You have to always look at your glass as half full. And that sounds very cliche because people can look at it like, well, it really is half empty. Boo. When it comes to Ashley Burney, that glass is always half full. Why? Because I worked for it. Mm-hmm. Why? Because I wake up every day with the full intention to be the best version of Ashley, even when I don't feel like it. Even when I'm tired and it may be gloomy outside, you'll have, a journal, some sort of journal or something nearby, because that's how we can slip into a funk, right? And we could allow what we're feeling to be like, oh, well, I am a loser. I do suck at this. Yeah. I'm not worthy of this. So to remind them that their circumstances and the things that they will grow through, not go through, but grow through, are those experiences that you'll look back in life and go, how I really got through that. And I didn't think I would. Yeah. And that's the sweet part of it. So those are just a few that I try to remind my kids that will allow them to grow and kind of take what they're learning and being able to apply it in life situations and have a life skill, and seeing that there is something positive that comes out of, ashes. You just gotta take them, hold them close and realize that you're everything and more, so.
I love that. You said some really incredible things. One thing I wanted to touch on is you mentioned grow through, not go through. And I think that's so major because we definitely have to recognize that we grow through everything that we go through. We experience everything. And even if it feels really shitty,
Yeah,
like you have to
absolutely.
ask yourself afterwards, like, what did I learn? Like, what could have gone differently? What could I have done differently or better? Even if there's nothing, but just take time to reflect on either how you got there, how you don't ever want
Absolutely.
to get there again. Like all of those little
Yes.
things matter.
And being open as well, because I feel like sometimes our egos,
Mm-hmm.
and oftentimes we got to check those things. Like, and it was so funny. A podcast, I think I shared with you before we started, I listened to a podcast before a podcast.
Yes.
Why? Because I like to see, in seeing or hearing those things that I prayed for to say that would happen. If they've happened, I'm like, oh, yes. Like it just feels so good.
Yeah.
Um, but it was listening to this podcast and understanding that, you are your biggest threat.
Mm-hmm.
What you tell yourself, what you remind yourself of, and who you are and whose you are, it will silence that negativity so quick,
Yep.
even when you don't want to say it. There's power in what we say and what we affirm over our lives. And I talk to myself all the time. Now, I've told my kids, listen, I promise you I'm not crazy. I promise you I'm not crazy. But let me tell you something. If you hear me talking to myself, just know that something has been deposited in me and I have to say it. So if it is, Ashley, you're going to go out there and you are going to impact on a global level.
Yes.
When it happens, I'm going to tell my kids, you remember what I said? Now,
Remember when you thought
sometimes
it was crazy?
you thought I was crazy, but I'm not crazy. I needed to affirm,
Yes.
because sometimes we write it, but there's power in what we say, what comes out of our mouth. And
Yeah.
so that is where it's just been that's been a joyride. But yeah.
Yay. I love all of that. So I was going to dive in earlier to like the heavier topics, but
Yeah.
I just love going with the flow of the conversation.
Yes,
So we
yes.
kind of talked about mostly everything else I already wrote down to ask you, which
Oh, yes.
I love. But are you open to going into the heavier stuff now and sharing some of your thoughts?
I've already kind of had the disclaimer of as if I, start to choke up, or I'm very transparent. And I believe that our transparency allows for another's blessing to unfold. So I'm definitely open to sharing and tapping into the stuff that I've grown through. Let me
Yes.
just say that.
Yeah. Whenever you're ready, you can just share. I don't really have any questions. It's whatever.
Yeah. So, when we talk about like life's journey and having confidence, and what are things that I like to keep close, and what has built me into the woman I am today, is having to experience such a gut wrenching process in 2017. And I would not, as crazy as it is and as crazy as it sounds when I share, I would not do anything differently. And to tap into what that process was for me, was I discovered at the age of 32 that I had a condition called, or I have a condition called Chiari malformation. And what that is it's a neurological condition and you're born with it. So if it's not detected when you're born, when you're have a chance at life, then you'll start to experience symptoms as you age. And so it wasn't until I was 32 and I was working full time and in nonprofits and loving my job and loving everything I was doing. And I started to have these really, really, really bad migraines. And it got so bad that I had to work in the dark. And I'm like, listen, we can't be out here being a boss babe, having to work in the dark, where I'm like seeing spots on walls. It started to affect my eyesight. And so I knew when over the counter medicine stopped working, something was wrong. And I started to have those thoughts in my head of something is wrong. And I don't really want to say it, but it may help if I say it. I felt as if I had some sort of like tumor
Yeah.
or cancer or something that was taking away from who I was striving to be every day. So once I knew, and my go-to was Excedrin. I love me some Excedrin because I could be able to take it, anything, and it would be gone. Well, when Excedrin stopped working, I knew I needed to go to the doctor. And so this crazy healthcare system and trying to fight and get to the root of what we feel and how we feel and being misdiagnosed and not having time, and the list could go on. But for me, it was going to a doctor and telling him my symptoms and it being kind of like brushed under the rug as, oh, you're not getting enough sleep. Let me tell you something. Oh, I sleep. I know when to turn it off. I'm in bed probably about 8:30. And I said, sleep 8, that's not it. Because he would ask me, what all are you involved in? And it was like, I gave him my list, and my list was long, but it was what I did. It was who I am, like it was Ashley.
Yeah.
And so, he prescribes sleeping medication. This is after I said, I get enough sleep, came home, told my husband, I said, I'm really bothered because I know when I start taking this medicine and I started to see all these side effects and just all of this, stuff that, it would make me feel like a walking zombie. And I'm like, that's not who I want to, why, that's not how I want to feel.
Right.
So short of a long story, I pushed through, I got a CAT scan done. And the CAT scan, keep in mind, he was primary care. So primary care, word to the wise is primary care does not need to be cross-examining areas that they're not specialists in, okay? So he says, well, it came back that, you had it's called Chiari malformation. And, and I'm like, I've never heard of it. So I start getting on the internet. Oh, Jesus. Got on the internet, saw, what it was and who it affects and people of all ages. And then I start seeing that these people had to have brain surgery. And then I'm like, oh my God, no. So I remained open though. And I said, okay, I have this condition. And he goes, I'm going to refer you to a neurologist. I said, okay, great. Because now it's out of your wheelhouse. Because if it were up to you, and if I didn't push through, I would have just been on sleeping medication that I could have, if I did not follow through with what was recommended, I could have died.
Yeah.
So I went to the neurologist. He says, let me do an MRI. And this was familiar with him. And, he heard of the condition. He treats people with it. And so he went on and, he says, we're going to send you for this MRI. And he goes, and if it comes back, we'll just discuss next steps. I'm like, okay. Never in a million years, I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be me that is going to have to go through what's to come.
Wolfpack, that wraps up part 1 of our conversation with Ashley. I hope you all have enjoyed it so far. She has talked about so many amazing things, and her journey is so incredible, and her insight is even better. So please tune in next week for part 2 of our conversation with Ashley. Be safe. Peace and love.